Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. Here are the stories we're following today.
John, we begin with the latest developments in the war in the Middle East and a warning from Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He says Israel risks fueling a Hamas insurgency in post-war Gaza. Blinken cautions there will still be thousands of armed militants in the area, even if Israel invades the city of Rafah.
Israel's on the trajectory potentially to inherit an insurgency with many armed Hamas left, or if it leaves, a vacuum filled by chaos, filled by anarchy, and probably refilled by Hamas.
Secretary of State Blinken added the Biden administration has not seen a credible Israeli plan to shield civilians in a Rafah assault. He made the comments on NBC's Meet the Press. Catch the program Sundays on Bloomberg Radio.
And campus protests over the war in Gaza colliding with college graduation season. Comedian Jerry Seinfeld was the commencement speaker at Duke University this weekend. About 30 students walked out chanting "Free Palestine" and waving flags when he was introduced, but Seinfeld didn't address the protests. A small group of demonstrators also showed up at UC Berkeley's commencement on Saturday, but the university says the protesters left voluntarily and nobody was arrested. More schools have threatened student protesters with arrest or expulsion if they don't clear out pro-Palestinian encampments ahead of graduation ceremonies.
Well, meantime, John, Bloomberg News has learned that President Biden is going to quadruple tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles this week and sharply increase levies for other key industries. Bloomberg's chief North Asia correspondent Stephen Engel has the details.
The announcement could come as early as Tuesday in the United States tomorrow, but there could be seeing a doubling or even a tripling of other target industries and products like batteries, like solar cells. Steel and aluminum have already been targeted, whether there's going to be an increase there. But again, these products are not imported into the United States in great volumes.
Bloomberg's Stephen Engel also points out that Biden's plan for more tariffs is mostly symbolic, as China does not rely on U.S. consumers in those sectors.
And in another development, U.S. officials intend to highlight security concerns with China's development of artificial intelligence. Senior administration officials say the emerging technology will be a major topic when representatives of the U.S. and China meet tomorrow in Geneva. The meeting initiates talks agreed to last year by President Biden and Xi Jinping to address security and safety concerns over AI, even as the two countries intensify their competition in that sphere.
Well, President Biden could face an uphill battle, John, convincing voters the economy's headed in the right direction. That's what the latest polling is indicating, and we get the numbers from Bloomberg's Dan Schwartzman.
A new poll from the Financial Times shows that President Biden's prospects for re-election are being dampened by voters' concerns over inflation. According to the latest from the FT Michigan Ross poll, high prices are one of the biggest challenges for 80% of voters. People disapproving of Biden's handling of the economy increased in 1 month from 55% to 58%. The poll also showed that voters blame Biden for higher gas and food prices without giving him any credit for a strong jobs market and a booming economy. Dan Schwartzman, Bloomberg Radio.
And we now turn to the latest developments in the criminal trial involving Donald Trump. The star prosecution witness in the hush money trial is set to take the stand today. We get the latest from Bloomberg law host June Grosso in New York.
On Friday, jurors saw Donald Trump's 2018 tweets defending a $130,000 hush money agreement with adult film actress Stormy Daniels, ahead of potentially explosive testimony from Michael Cohen, the star prosecution witness who made the payment on Trump's behalf. Prosecutors have been laying the groundwork for Cohen's testimony because he comes to the stand with a lot of baggage that will surely be explored on cross-examination. In New York, June Grosso, Bloomberg Radio.
And June, that's not the only high-profile court case happening in Manhattan today. Opening statements are set to begin in the trial of Archegos founder Bill Hwang on fraud, racketeering, conspiracy, and market manipulation charges. Bloomberg's Shonali Bassick is covering that case and brings us this preview.
In one of the most highly watched white-collar crime cases in recent history, Bill Hwang, the founder of Archegos Capital Management, is set to face trial today in Manhattan federal court, where jury trial will begin. The Justice Department is set to lay out an argument in a high-stakes debate where Bill Hwang is expected to defend himself vigorously, even drawing concerns about the banks themselves, which had lost so much money as Archegos collapsed, including Credit Suisse, which later failed. In New York, Shonali Bassick, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, thanks, Shonali. And turning to the markets, futures higher as we begin a new trading week. The S&P 500 coming off its third straight week of gains. That's the longest winning run since February. Meanwhile, the Dow has gained for rising 8 straight sessions. And Alan Zafran, the co-CEO at IEQ Capital, says there's a lot of momentum behind the latest rally.
Everyone's been worried about the Fed's going to cut rates, so it won't cut rates. Oh my gosh, I have to reprice my models. But stocks keep going up anyway. And I think the lesson learned is the economy isn't as interest rate sensitive as it used to be. And there was so much money thrown at corporations and individuals through COVID that it has a lot of pent-up cash on the sidelines ready to buy any asset at any drop.
Alan Zafran at IEQ Capital says the big event for the markets this week likely is going to be Wednesday's consumer price print.
In company news, John, Amazon, Pfizer, Microsoft, and Morgan Stanley are among companies poised to boost their presence in France. President Emmanuel Macron is hosting 180 CEOs and executives for the Choose France Summit. The flagship event is now in its 7th year. It's part of a push by the Macron government to reindustrialize the country, simplify its regulations to attract foreign companies, and make it a financial hub for the post-Brexit European Union. Stick with Bloomberg. This afternoon, President Macron is going to sit down with Bloomberg News editor-in-chief John Micklethwaite for what we expect will be a very wide-ranging interview. That's coming up at 1 p.m. Wall Street time, and you can hear it on Bloomberg Radio and watch it on Bloomberg Television.
And Nathan, if you're hitting the road this Memorial Day, you're certainly not alone. In fact, AAA expects about 38.4 million people will drive the holiday weekend. That's the most in more than 2 decades of data tracking the holidays travel numbers. AAA saying almost 44 million people will embark on trips of all forms. That's the highest, second highest number AAA has seen since 2005, when consumer sentiment had recovered from the September 11, 2001 attacks and had yet to be roiled by the 2008 financial crisis. And that brings us to 5:08 on Wall Street. Time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. For that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, John. The bribery trial of U.S. Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey begins this morning in Manhattan. Menendez has defied calls to resign from the Senate. The 70-year-old Democrat and his wife are accused of accepting bribes from 3 wealthy businessmen in return for favors. Accusations include meddling in criminal investigations and taking actions benefiting the governments of Egypt and Qatar. The feds say they found stacks of cash and gold bars in Menendez's house. The senator has pleaded not guilty. There has been a major shuffle in the Russian government. President Vladimir Putin has tapped a civilian economist as his surprise new defense minister. Andrei Belousov is to replace Sergei Shoigu. Shashank Joshi with The Economist tells us Shoigu had been in the job since 2012.
I'm not surprised he's being moved on. I am perhaps a little bit more surprised we're seeing an economist go into that post, but it is worth remembering that Shoigu's predecessor, Anatoly Sadukov, he was also a business figure. He was Minister of Taxes.
Shoigu's deputy was arrested last month on bribery charges. The controlled demolition to remove a portion of Baltimore's Francis Scott Key Bridge is scheduled for today. It was postponed yesterday due to lightning. Meanwhile, cruises have been rerouted to Norfolk because of the bridge collapse. Carnival Cruise Lines has announced that it is planning to embark guests on Carnival Pride's May 19th cruise in Norfolk, Virginia, but expects to end sailing in Baltimore. Regina Ali with AAA in Baltimore went on a cruise March 24th, not aware that she was on one of the last ones to sail under the bridge. The captain announced later that the bridge had collapsed and would likely impact their return to Baltimore.
No one expected that when we left Baltimore, on March 24th, that we were going to be the last Carnival ship sailing under the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
Officials expect the Dolly, the ship that crashed into the Key Bridge, to be moved back to the port of Baltimore. Finally, actor Steve Buscemi was assaulted in Manhattan. Police say the 66-year-old Brooklyn native was walking when he was randomly punched. Buscemi was taken to a hospital for bruising, swelling, and bleeding to his left eye. The actor's publicist says Buscemi is okay and appreciates everyone's well wishes. The attacker hasn't been caught yet. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, John.
Michael, thank you. And it's now 5:11 on Wall Street. That's time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. And for that, good morning, John Stashower.
All right, good morning, John. Fifth worst playoff loss in Knicks history. Game 4 at Indiana. They trailed the Pacers by 20 in the first quarter, by 30 in the second. The Pacers' lead grew to 43. Indiana won 121-89 to tie the series at 2. Pacers made their shots. Knicks missed theirs. They missed 30 three-pointers. The Villanova trio, Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo, together shot 10 for 36, made only 1 3. Game 5's tomorrow at the Garden. That's where Knicks coach Tom Thibodeau is looking towards.
We can't have a hangover. We got to fix it, and we have to come with a will and determination to respond to what happened. And I think the biggest thing, and this team has responded all year, so that's what we're expecting to do. We got to put the work into it and be ready to go.
The home teams won every game in the West. The road teams won every game as Denver won again at Minnesota, 115-107. Nikola Jokic scored 35 in the win. Anthony Edwards had 44 in the loss. The Atlanta Hawks had a 3% chance of winning the NBA draft lottery. They won it. They'll have the first pick. Stanley Cup playoffs. Florida won again in Boston, 3-2. A disputed go-ahead third-period goal. Bruins felt and Alexander Barkov cross-check allowed him to score. Panthers now lead the series 3-1 in the Battle of Western Canada. Vancouver won 4-3 at Edmonton for a 2-1 lead. The Rangers are up 3-1. They'll host Carolina tonight at Citi Field. Mets were 2 outs from getting swept by Atlanta. Brandon Nimmo with a walk-off pinch hit 2-run homer. Bottom of the ninth, Mets won 4-3. Yankees blew most of a 6-0 lead, but they hit 5 home runs. They won 10-6 at Tampa Bay. The Red Sox topped the Nationals 3-2. Rory McIlroy, 17 under par. He won in Charlotte by 5 shots. That's even with a double bogey on the final hole. It's the 4th time that he's won at Quail Hollow. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. John.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager. The U.S. could be facing new friction over the Middle East and Asia, with the State Department offering a further rationale for President Biden's decision to withhold offensive weapons for Israel, and new details coming up about the president's tariffs plans for China. For more on all this, we're joined now by Bloomberg News senior editor Bill Ferries. Bill, good morning. So we heard over the weekend from Secretary Blinken on the Sunday show, seeming to prod Israel to think more about what the conduct of this war could mean for Gaza post-war. What do you make of some of the Secretary's latest comments?
Well, thanks for having me. The criticism from the administration just continues to ramp up. We heard Secretary Blinken this weekend saying that even if Israel goes in and takes heavy action and goes after these brigades of Hamas militants it believes are kind of holed up there, he said there's still going to be thousands of supporters left, armed supporters, armed militants, and that Israel is basically going to inherit an insurgency that's going to dog it potentially for years after this operation concludes. The administration's still very focused on trying to prevent Israel from going in with a full ground invasion. They also want to try to see some of these talks that have been on and off again in Qatar and then in Cairo get a little more momentum behind them. And they say they still haven't seen a plan to help move the civilian population that has basically been trapped in Rafah largely for several weeks now. Hasn't seen a plan for how to get them safely out. Israel says about 300,000 of those people have left, but it's not really clear if some of the areas they have to traverse through are still basically a war zone, and they're not going to areas that are necessarily in any condition to accept tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of more internal refugees.
And on top of all this, we're getting a little bit more color, Bill, on some reporting that Bloomberg News did last week about President Biden's plans to pretty significantly increase tariffs on certain Chinese goods.
Right. We knew that there were likely tariffs coming for things like electric vehicles, batteries, some components in the solar panel industry. We had also heard about steel and aluminum. But the headline number, as you were hinting at there, was really the Chinese electric vehicles, the tariff likely jumping from 27.5% to 102.5%. So basically whatever the price would be on import doubling. Now, as you and I know, you can't go out there and buy BYD vehicles in the United States at this point. The tariffs that were in place We're basically prohibiting that already. This makes it, I think this puts all of that further out of reach. It's in some ways symbolic, both of the presidential campaign that's going on and this continuing heightened tensions between the U.S. and China in the middle of a campaign where I think both parties, both presidential candidates, want to show how tough they can be on Beijing.
Only about 30 seconds left here, Bill, but can we see more of those tensions play out when U.S. and Chinese officials are scheduled to meet in Geneva tomorrow?
So we're expecting this meeting in Geneva to talk about artificial intelligence, the development of that industry. The expectation is you could start to have the world's two biggest economies talk about putting some guardrails and general regulations on how AI develops. The U.S. is going to go into it, according to our reporting, with a big focus on concerns about how China's development may be undermining the national security of both the United States and many other nations out there. So on the one hand, it's good they're having these talks. On the other hand, it's probably going to be a difficult conversation.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm John Tucker. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.